Hey guys, and welcome back. This week we're working on Nick Cavanagh's truck, the Ripper. This is the Burnout truck. He's going to be taking this across the country doing some things, but he's had some issue with the power steering. Apparently, I don't know much about Mopars, but power steering pumps like to not be in one piece. When you start doing burnouts, it starts throwing the shaft out and just destroying the pump. So we're going to try to bypass that and give him something solid so he can keep doing burnouts. Nick has brought us an MR2, Toyota MR2 pump. This is an electric power steering pump. I guess on the forums and things, guys are doing these and it's working great. So we're going to try to get the electrical side of this wired out and get it so it'll pull power, be safe, and not blow up on them on the track. We make some mounting brackets to mount and secure it, and then we're going to plumb it back into the power steering system. So let's get to it. I've got the power steering pump out, which used to live right here. He's got it bypassed. I don't know Dodges, but I'm thinking he just ran a different belt and bypassed where the power steering would be. The lines are disconnected down there on the rack, somewhere down in there, down that way. Plans are, I believe, I've got this pretty heavy duty, I don't know if that's inner fender support, whatever this is, and I got some pickup points here so I can make a bracket and mount the electrical power steering pump somewhere in here. It's also going to need a reservoir to put the fluid in so it has something to suck out of, and I'm going to add a cooler into it, not because it's going to need it, but just, you know, because burnouts, I always add coolers and everything does burnouts just to try to keep that fluid cool, because that motor is going to get hot, and we're going to try to help fix some of that and safeguard some of our stuff so that when the motor gets hot, that doesn't have any problems. Looking around in here, I can see some wiring's been done. I think this is a coolant fan, radiator fan. Remember he was saying that this is his radiator fan relay. It's got some issues at speed, or at some point it's blowing this 30 amp fuse, so he turns it off when driving. Relays are good for fans. Fans draw a lot of amperage, so, you know, on and off. So if you got something that draws a lot of power, you want to have it as close to the battery as possible, some large gauge wires. A relay removes that load from going somewhere else to a switch or something, so that's good. However, some of the wiring is a little small for what I'd like to see. It is a smaller radiator fan, so it's not going to be like one of the OEM fans that draws like 30, 40, 50 amps, but he's still pulling 30 amps and melting the fuse. So we're going to attack that wiring while we're in here, and everything's out of the way. The easiest way I like doing radiator fans is a continuous duty relay. A continuous duty relay is made to hold that light switch on continuously. That's why it's named that way. So I'm going to run a continuous duty relay for the power steering pump, because that's just going to be on, and it's going to have a lot of amperage to it. I think up to 70 to 90 amps when you're at full lock. So the little kit that I bought had 2 continuous duty relays, and I'm going to throw one in here on the fan relay wiring. So we're going to bypass that relay, well, remove that relay, we're going to replace it with a continuous duty solenoid and upgrade the wiring to the electrical fan. That's where the fan relay was. It's right over the motor. Wires have a long length of run to run. I'm going to try to tuck this back in here. Hopefully it'll be a little bit cooler up by the headlight, and it'll be hidden. So I drilled a hole here, put a rib nut, and we're going to be using this 120 amp continuous duty relay. That's going to mount right there, out of the way. You probably will never even see it. And then I can sneak my wires back along here in the core support, wrap them with loom, and you'll never know anything was added. So next step, the factory, this radiator fan had a weird connector on there. I like using some upgraded connectors. I get these from the junkyard all the time. It's basically just a weather pack connector, and they've got larger wires in them. That'll be a perfect connection point here, but you can still disconnect it if you need to service or replace on this radiator. You can take it out and not have to cut wires. So I'm going to get these wires ran and terminated to the continuous duty relay, and then we'll add some power to it. So this is the style fan that this vehicle has. It blows fairly well, better than most of this style of fan that I've had in the past. But in talking with the customer, he has had problems in the past. Burnout competitions and things, he says it buries the temp needle. So I'm assuming that the wiring was not the issue for that. I'm assuming it's probably the product he's using, the fan. He's going to research and figure out an upgrade path for that. but that's not going to happen in this cluster of upgrades we're going to do. So now that I know that, and that's the reason I was asking these questions, was what's the game plan down the road. Anyways, I'm going to future-proof this a little bit. I'm going to step up the wiring on the battery side going to the constant duty relay, just because I know that later down the line this fan may not be this low draw fan that we have now. Even though it's melting a 30 amp fuse, I think that's more because of the wire size that was used than that fan is pulling 30 amps. But I'm erring on the side of caution, and I'm just going to run, I think it's 8 gauge wire straight from the battery distribution point off of the little fuse block deal, and I'm going to run that to the constant duty relay, so that if and when he or I or some magical person in the future decides to put an electrical fan on here, you just disconnect the other side and you can upgrade the wiring for that. So future-proof it, 8 gauge wire. I'm going to get that ran to that constant duty relay. He would like to have full control of his fan. I like to have things be autonomous just because electronics are fun. So I usually run some sort of a temperature switch or something so the fan does fan things, and then when I want it to do me things, I can switch it or whatever. He likes to have full control. So we're going to do that. We're going to add a switch inside the cab so he can control his fan if and when he wants to turn it on. So that's going to be real simple to do. I'm just going to ground one side of the 2 prongs on the constant duty relay, ground one side, run a switch inside. He's already got some switches in there. That'll be a ground, so when he hits the switch, it'll ground that leg, and then I'm going to run power so that it, trips the other leg. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is, so he'll be able to control that from inside the cab. Whenever you got the switch on, fan's going to be on. Whenever you turn the switch off, fan's going to be off. Whether the key is on or off does not matter. Good for burnouts. Stuck my positive wire in there, hit it around the back side. Mounted the continuous duty relay here, have that wired into the switch inside, and it's got power going to it from the power block up here, which is going to feed it with 8 gauge wire, and this goes down to, this is 10 gauge wire, and I rewired the fan. Added a quick connect weather pack fitting right here so you can take it apart if you need to, and secured everything and loomed it out of the way. One thing to note when you're doing these things, if you're going to upgrade the power side, you have to upgrade the ground side. Don't leave that little 16, 18 gauge ground wire and expect it's going to do something. So that fan should run phenomenally. Not sure if that's going to keep him from overheating during burnouts, but at least I know the fan that he has is going to run correctly and get the voltage that it needs. Also, with the larger wiring, it allows for an upgrade later. If we determine that that's not good enough for burnouts, we need a bigger fan or a better fan, the truck side of the wiring will already be done. Been watching the channel long, you know that I like to recycle things or just use what I have before I buy stuff. I had a power steering reservoir for the Kia, the little derby car we got going, and I thought it needed a reservoir. It did not. So I have this reservoir sitting here that I think is going to work perfect for what he needs. It's got an inlet and outlet. I don't know how I'm going to do this mounting. It's supposed to have 2 grommets, which I don't have. I might have to figure something out for that, but sits down in a little deal, and it has a little rubber isolator there. So if I can make something that captures that, we can get this thing mounted. I'm thinking somewhere in here-ish might be good. You can still get to the fill port, and I'll still have room in here for other activities. So I'm going to go see what I can make for that. Spent probably a lot longer than I'm going to care to admit on this bracket, but I did not have the bottom pieces here. Excuse the red, that's my clamp that melted to this, but I'll clean that up and paint it in a minute. What I was going for was I wanted rubber so that this plastic piece did not, vibrate and crack. So I wanted to rubber isolate it like the factory did. I made an okay job. I'm using scrap that I had laying around, angle iron, a washer. I don't know what this strap was from. But anyways, it's pretty decently thick. The angle iron's 1/4 inch. This stuff here is, I don't know, 1/8 inch, but should be enough for what we're doing. I've got the rubber mount isolated here, the factory mount, and then in the bottom, I took 2 pieces of 3/8 hose, ran it around these little nubs, and then I pressed it in with my clamp while it was hot. So what that did was it melted the rubber, so it formed it to these pieces, and it made a nice little friction seal. Once that cools down a little bit, I'm going to separate it and paint this, and then it's going to be rock solid, and we'll get bolted down right here. All right, so I got a little excited. Our Summit order finally came in. I say finally, it's usually like 2 day shipping, very quick. But I got excited because I got the box, I got everything opened, and started checking things because I'm getting on a deadline, and I got to make sure with the fittings that I ordered that everything lines up right, so that I don't have to send stuff back or order new stuff or whatever. But I think I'm good. I say that without having the pump in my hand right now, but I think I'm good. Anyways, I'm going to share with you the part numbers that I used, just in case somebody else is doing some crazy. I got the Hayden cooler. It's not as big as the box. It's the 1009 cooler. It's a power steering oil cooler. It's pretty small. And I got a 6AN hose. It's a Fragola. This is the part number for that. It's just a 6AN hose that was 36 inches, which is what I needed. This is the fitting that goes into the rack, ICT billet. M18 1.5 O-ring to 6AN. That's what goes in the feed side of the steering rack. And then this is what's going to go into the MR2 pump. It's 16 millimeter by, that's supposed to be 1.5. I'm hoping that's what that is. By 1.5 to a Toyota 6AN. You know, basically it does that. And it does that. So we'll see if that works with the pump. I used one of these little universal jobs to stick through and clamp down on the, I'll show you. I put the cooler right there. Not that it needs to be in the airflow, but it's in my, in my line path. The return line came out and it went to, the reservoir or whatever over here. So I just stuck it over there. Goes to the cooler, comes out of the cooler, and I use their supplied hose. I'm gonna hide it back here, and then this is gonna be where my reservoir goes. So somewhere in here-ish, be where that terminates. And wherever the pump goes, this is the pump line that I put on place. It's that Fragola line. It's nice coated over top the braid, so it should be pretty durable. And things. That's where that's gonna go right now. So as soon as I get my reservoir figured out, the bracket for that's going to go here-ish, and then my line will snake somewhere up here into that. From the reservoir, it'll go into the return side of the pump because it's got to have a straw to suck from, and then the pressure from the outlet of the pump will go to this little guy. Moving on. All right, cooler's mounted, reservoir's mounted. Bracket came out pretty good. It could be a little more solid, but it'll work for what it is. It's just a little wobbly because this piece here of the inner fender is not attached. I may decide to tie that together just to keep that from wobbling, but it's pretty dang solid, and it's on the rubber isolators. I think we'll be all right. Anywho, I've got the rack outlet, low pressure side, comes up, goes through the cooler. I had it go into the bottom of the cooler. That way when it's pushing out, it won't try to, I don't know, there shouldn't be any air bubbles. Shouldn't be any anyway, but just because I ran it that way, into the bottom, out the top, and it comes into above, the top port here to fill, and then it'll suck from the bottom. I've got larger 5/8 hose on its way. It should be here today. And then I can run this straight into the pump suck tube, and then, hook up the AN line to the pump. I just got to figure out how I'm going to mount the pump now. All right, well, I had probably way too much time in this little bracket. Used some angle iron and parts of an old coil spring. Wanted to make something that was going to mount pretty sturdy for this pump because it is fairly heavy. And it's also going to be possibly moving around doing burnouts. So I made this contraption. It's going to capture itself very strong off this piece of angle iron down here. And I also made a little bracket for the top piece, just to stabilize it some. It's 1/8 inch steel, and the bottom is 1/4 inch, so it's going to be plenty strong. So let me get this assembled with some Loctite and get this pump put in. Real quick before I throw this pump in this area, power is coming off the power distribution point here, 8-gauge cable, 2 8-gauge cables actually, one for each of these 80 amp circuit breakers. Both of these can be reset. If they trip, they can be reset right here, so it makes it pretty easy to service if you're doing things in the burnout pit. Then I have 2 feeds that are coming off these constant duty relays that are going to tie into these 80 amp breakers. That's where the constant duty relays are going to get their power. One's for fan and one's for the power steering. Again, as we discussed earlier, they'll get their inputs, they'll draw their power, do power things, but the pump's going to sit over it, so I wanted to cover that first. Now let me get the pump in here. Well, the pump is there. Got this quick disconnect right there in case something happens. You need to pull all that power out because, you know, bad things happen. So that's there. I've got this thing bled. This is weird. I've never had electric power steering, but let me show you why. Let me show you why it's weird. Keys on. Pump's doing pump things, but the motor isn't running. Hi! This is just weird. Weird. Well, there you have it, guys. You can have electric power steering in your ride too. It's not that hard, just a little bit of power, a little bit of plumbing. You won't have any problems with burnouts. Make sure you watch us for more stuff coming up, and we'll see you on the next one.